Welcome to Be on the Ballot. I'm Jim Czek.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we got lots to talk about. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, make a deal. And I guess the question is, where is BC? But we'll get into that in a second here, because I did an interview this morning with MNP, the Licensed Insolvency Trustee, Renee Harman, and she said that like 3 in 5 British Columbians are worried that they can't make their debt repayments. That's a big number here in British Columbia. It's just a record number too.
It is a record number. Back when I was in MLA, we used a number of 20%. 20% were $200 within, solvency, and so to now see that number jump quite significantly, number one, it's not surprising. We've been through an unprecedented time of inflation. BC is leading the charge. So when you see politicians that stand up and say, no, everyone's fighting inflation, we need to realize that BC is, our inflation is higher than anyone else's, and has been, if you look at the last 18 months to, even further than that. The other thing that I would say is that, interest costs are up and housing costs are up. We're seeing, rents go, tick back up over the course of this last month. And that has an impact on people's bottom line. When you have have to pay rent, you let other things slide, or you start taking and putting other purchases on credit cards, etc. And the Great Reckoning, what do they call it? The wave of reckoning in the mortgage industry, and people refinancing their mortgages and going to higher amounts. That is huge and has a huge impact on how many dollars are available for your kids' soccer, or repairs and maintenance that you require on your car, or just feeding people in your families.
You're absolutely right.
Definitely scary.
You're absolutely right. British Columbia leading the way in things that we don't want to be leaders in. This one here, British Columbia, is more likely than any other province to feel that they have to stall their lives right now, to put their lives on hold because they can't, look at buying a house and different things because of their economic situation right now.
Absolutely. Or, they can't take a vacation. They're not going to be able to, afford something different in their lives. And I'm not even talking about, we're not talking about scaling up into luxury items or, a luxury lifestyle. We're talking about the basic necessities. When people are living paycheck to paycheck, they do not have, that $200 for, something that breaks. And it's very difficult right now for British Columbians.
I recommend people go watch that interview I did with Renee Harman of MNP. We talked about some of the things, and a lot of those are just like British Columbians have saddled themselves with debt because they've had to, using their credit cards to pay for groceries and stuff like that, and their car payments are out, like their insurance, their taxes, and all that stuff. They're just feeling the pinch there, and it's just getting worse and worse for British Columbians. 58% of British Columbians feel they may not even be able to make their debt repayments. That's a high number. 58%. You were talking about 18 to 20, 58% now.
Yeah. And, we have, our governments to look at. They are, driving the price of inflation. Our food prices have gone way out of control. Having been in Europe this last year, taking a look at how inexpensive food is, it was almost, it almost was angering to see how inexpensive food was, and to know how much we pay in Canada, where we are producing so much food for ourselves. So it is, we have no one to blame except our politicians, and really we vote for them. So that's our opportunity to change things.
Yeah, and then Gavin Dew, an MLA right now here representing Kelowna here. I think it was in your riding, actually. Gavin Dew is in your riding there. And he put out a tweet there and say that government has taken a wrecking ball to BC's public finances, an unprecedented deficit reaching new heights this year. So not only are British Columbians themselves facing the heat, our own government is racking up debt at unprecedented levels as well.
And we, this speaks to whether or not we're going to be able to lower taxes. And right now, there's just no way. The BC government has not focused on jobs, has not focused on economic stimulus. And so what we're faced with is high debt, high taxes to pay for that debt. And, not just to pay back the debt. We are not paying back any debt right now. We are paying for that debt in interest costs. And interest costs, if it was a ministry of the government, would be the fourth largest ministry. That's perspective for us, right? It's bigger than the whole ministry of education right now for the provincial government. Horrific to think about for today and for what that means for paychecks, but it's also horrific to think about what's in the future. What's in the future for our kids and our grandkids? I mean, we need to start getting serious about this. We are saddling them with such inordinate amount of debt that, I don't know how they're going to actually dig their way out of it.
David Eby promised British Columbians $1,000 into their bank account when he was looking to get reelected. And then turns out he says, we can't give the $1,000 because the investment capital is fleeing British Columbia. And then here we have the premiers of Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and BC would normally be included in that collection of Western provinces, including Ontario, the economic powerhouses, and BC is absent from this deal. And so they say they've done a deal, MOU, calling for the construction of new pipelines to the Ontario coastline and using Ontario steel to build this pipeline.
And you know what? It's a radical idea, but it's a good idea. And you know what? It cut BC out of it. BC likes to think of itself as having the only access that is real for Alberta. Alberta just solved that problem. Alberta and Danielle Smith, man, she just is like, you know what? If you won't play with me, I'll go somewhere else. I'll find another sandbox, and find another sandbox she did. I think that British Columbians need to be aware of what this means for them. This means that the revenue that pipeline would create is gone. And right now, the revenue that the Trans Mountain Pipeline twinning that was done is basically 0.25 of our entire Canadian GDP. It is literally a cash machine, and that machine is a cash machine for BC as well right now. So for us to not have that, for us to not see that that revenue coming through our jurisdictions and going to our ports and actually creating jobs for British Columbians is a tragedy. And literally, I want to shake Eby and say, where are you right now? What are you doing? And, his last press conferences have been lackluster. He looks a little distracted. He looks, almost off topic. He doesn't look well informed. I am not sure what's going on with him right now, but I am beginning to think more and more that maybe he's thinking a leadership race, but that will result in a leadership challenge for him this fall at his convention. But I am concerned for British Columbians right now. Our deficit is so high, and we have to get that under control.
Yeah, I guess that was his trump card. He thought that Pacific coastline was the trump card, but there you go. Ontario unlocks it because Alberta and Saskatchewan, kind of economic engines for Canada. Thinking Quebec had them on one side, British Columbia on the other side, and here we go. And Doug Ford says, I got the keys here, and that seems like a good deal. And Danielle Smith also talking about encouraging the Alberta government to buy, Canadian-made automobiles and stuff like that. So it looks like the three of them have figured out a deal. Danielle Smith, though, to me, seems like not, and I'm not going to even put the female, one of the most powerful and most effective people in Canada right now for a politician. She's on fire, that lady.
She is. She is focused. She is driven. She is on point, and she is doing her job, which is to fight for Albertans. What Canada fails to see is that if fighting for Albertans actually means that all of Canada will benefit. So Doug Ford knows that he will benefit. His province is going to benefit. He's after jobs for his Ontarians. He is after his steel industry. He knows that he's under tariffs right now. Oh my chicken, we are under the same tariffs. We are under copper tariff as well, which we produce. 80% of Canadian copper comes from BC. Honestly, we are in such a bad position right now, and Eby seems just absent on a lot of these issues, and I hope he steps up his game.
Yeah, he's still talking about liquor. I saw him saying that, we're going to hold the line on not buying American liquor. I'm just like, you're in the wrong game. You're not even in the game. You're talking nonsense, right?
And we have the U.S., the U.S. security minister basically coming and saying, yeah, if you don't want to travel here and if you don't want to drink or alcohol, all right, do what you're going to do. But, the reality is, unless you open your borders and remove all your tariffs, we're going to keep our tariffs on. And they're being very blunt about what they want, and we are so daft if we think that us not traveling there or seeing a reduction. I think StatsCan said the reduction was 30%. Less travel to the U.S. That is not going to make the dent that we hope it is. But EV keeps, trumping this as the be-all, end-all of retaliation. Meanwhile, buying ferries from China, and that just is mind-blowing to me to see his disingenuousness on that.
I don't know how they don't read the headlines like that. What we just talked about, MNP, 58% of British Columbians are scared they can't make their debt repayments. David Eby, the message is, if they can't make their debt repayments, they can't pay more taxes either. And you've chased away industry to pay the taxes. So who's left to pay for all these things that you apparently don't want to cut? And it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And then the other thing on Danielle Smith, so many in the media and so many on the other side of the spectrum have called her a traitor to this country. She's the one that's trying to get more money for Western Canadian Select than anybody else, because if she can get another options for Western Canadians, we won't have to sell it at that massive discount to our only customer that's able to buy it.
Totally. She is the only one who is actually opening new trade options for that which her province, manufactures. And good on her. I do not fault her for being focused, for being laser sharp with her intention and her drive, and she is succeeding. And those that want to come along and be a part of that, Scott Moe and Doug Ford, awesome. Let's keep going. And I think that there's going to be some further political science case studies about how she's conducted herself and what she's actually achieved for the Albertan. I heard her compared to just recently Ralph Klein. Hold no punches, very straightforward. You do not need to think or worry about what she's about, because she's going to let you know.
Exactly. She won't tell one audience one thing and another audience a different thing. Danielle Smith will tell you the way it is. And if if the elbows up crowd, I think Danielle Smith has got the sleeves rolled up and she's got the head down and she's focused and doing the work for not only Albertans but for Canadians in general.
Totally agree.
And then we talked about the David Eby sending out that work, and here's Dan Elbus pointing this out too as well, that the federal infrastructure, they're doing a committee hearing on this thing, that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank provided $1 billion in loans for BC ferries to buy Chinese-made ships. Where is Carney's message on this? Why isn't he putting pressure on British Columbia? Because that is, again, federal money being sent to China, which is work we need here in British Columbia and a project we need here in British Columbia, and also we could be using Canadian steel and aluminum to build this.
We need industry to return. You mentioned earlier, Jim, about where are we going to get the money from? There's lots of places you can get money from: corporate taxes, personal taxes, and revenues from industry. And we do not have any of those thriving. We talked about the personal taxes; those are going to continue to plummet because people are not making money. They're not making more money. They don't have enough to actually live or thrive. And you're going to see a huge amount of people, claiming bankruptcy and not being able to pay things. Corporate taxes, corporations have left. The higher bureaucracy, higher taxation. We are in a horrible state when it comes to actually having industry, and then corporations and businesses. Then you look at our industry, and it doesn't matter which one we talk about, whether it's mining or whether it's forestry, they are hurting. What better way to stimulate those economies than to actually put the $4 billion towards building up our economy and building up our shipbuilding infrastructure? And instead of doing that, even if it was 4.3 billion, 4.4 billion, if we had jobs attached to that, if we had industry attached to that, if we knew how much steel was going to be, used in the manufacturing of that, I know that Canadians would be on board with that. Canadians are upset right now because that money is going to China, and not just China, that money is going to the Chinese government. That is a scary prospect that is who's going to be building us. And we have track record where the Chinese government has not used the steel that is to the same level of quality as our own steel, has not done, the security aspects the way we want them to. And so why are we allowing them further infiltration into our infrastructure at the denial of our own resources.
Yeah, and then I've heard from even some of the left-leaning journalists. I had a discussion with one of them just a couple days ago, and they said, "Well, who else is going to build it?" Because they're doing it cheaper. Of course, they're doing it cheaper. They're using slave labor, or they're using labor that they can abuse. There's so many human rights violations with them. They're using inferior steel. We've seen that in Patello Bridge. They don't have an industrial carbon tax. So I said to him, how then should Canadian companies compete? Can we do that? Can we abuse workers? Can we use inferior steel? And can we not pay the industrial carbon tax? He said, well, you make a good point. I'm just like, that is the only point, right? That is the point.
Yeah, totally.
Not a point, that is the point, right?
The bureaucracy that we are under and the taxation levels that we are under simply render us not competitive on a global stage, but we are that across the board. And I think that the other tell to this whole thing is that we actually have the $2.8 billion deficit of foreign investments in Canadian securities. That means that $2.8 million more went outside of Canada than came into Canada in May. But this would be shocking if it was a one-off, but it has been this way for the last 4 months. Yeah. I don't know why the newspapers are not writing stories about this. That is investment dollars fleeing from Canada and making investments into the US. We need to sound the alarm bell, because $13.4 billion of Canadian dollars purchased foreign securities in May. Those are dollars that are not coming into Canada, that are not coming into our businesses, into our corporations, and into our jobs. And then we wonder why our people, are so close to insolvency.
Well, when we started this show a while back, months ago now, we talked about it, the giant sucking sound. And that giant sucking sound is getting louder and louder and louder. The Financial Post did do a story on it today, and it says Canadians, finally, right? Canadians are fleeing Canada and investing in the U.S., and even they're buying U.S. treasuries, which is they're investing in U.S. debt before they invest in Canadian debt. And Mark Carney has no room to speak. Over 93% of his assets in his blind trust are U.S. securities.
Totally. So it's no surprise. It's also no surprise that the investment dollars are watching who became our prime minister. And you'd think that would shift. If there was a renewed confidence in our economy, and there simply isn't. Tiff Macklem is going on record saying, we're in for a recession. That is not going to instill confidence into investment dollars coming to Canada, nor will Canada continuing to choose to invest outside of our borders, whether it's our prime minister's holdings and 93% of them being outside the borders, or whether it's a ferry decision that the BC government makes. We are continuing to send billions of dollars outside of our borders, and it's not going to bode well for the companies that are here.
You make a great point there, and Danielle Smith said it very clearly. He said, you want the world to invest in Canada, you need to repeal Bill C-69, Bill C-48, get rid of the emissions cap. And I think she had a list of other ones you probably are more familiar with. But she said, you want to send a message, get rid of these things that are in the way of investment here in Canada.
Absolutely. And she's right. She is unequivocally right. Pierre was big on that over the course of his campaign. There are so many impediments to doing business in Canada right now. The business environment simply is untenable to corporations. The vice president of Pembina was in BC last year, and she said, we came here because of the political climate, and we are leaving here because of the political climate. We are leaving Canada because we simply no longer believe that we can do business here competitively. That is so straightforward. She's not hiding it. They're not hiding it. Companies are sounding the alarm bell. And, our own company did an analysis, and the EHT, the 5 paid sick days, and the 13 stat holidays, and the increase to all of the CPP, et cetera. It's increased our employment costs at 8%. 8%, and our employment costs are one of our largest expenses. 8%. That, like, most companies will have a 10% profit, maybe if they are fully, like, profitable. So taking 8% of that right to the bottom line, and it's no wonder why companies aren't thriving and are not able to make it anymore. And it's also, I mean, it's not a mystery to understand why companies can't pay their people more. They are paying so much in overhead for every single person that is in their employ. It's simply not possible anymore.
Yeah, the problem with the NDP and the Liberals is that their solution to regulation is more regulation. We see that with Bill 6948. The solution to that is Bill C5. Like, come on, right? Like, it's almost comical if it wasn't so painful to many people in Canada here. It's just, I mean, if you're a big business and you're looking on either side of the border right now where to make that investment, and you look at regulation, taxation, and then you look at Trump saying, "Come here, no, I'll release you from speed, one thing, I'll fast track you, less taxation and less regulation." I mean, where do you go?
Where do you go? And also all of your executives, all of your well-paid, let's call the, rig workers, like, they're making six figures, and where are they going to go? Interesting statistic. I think you brought this up in an earlier episode, but you talked about how, 5 out of the 6 last NHL Stanley Cups have been won by teams who are in states that do not have state
Florida.
taxes.
Yeah.
And you wonder why, they're going and being able to attract the best talent and paying them not as much money as any Canadian city. And it's like, I was talking to some friends earlier this week, and I was saying, like, do you really think that that's true? Like, that more, top talent would come here? And they're like, well, isn't that true for every top talent? And I thought,
common sense.
Yeah, I've got 2 family members right now in the healthcare industry who are choosing to stay in the States largely because they can get paid more money and work less days. In fact, one of them said, hey, I can work 4 days a month and make as much as I would working full time in Canada. How is that? Like, that's not even a comparable situation, but they're taking into account the tax bracket that they would be in coming to Canada and saying, like, I only need to work 4 days a week, or sorry, 4 days a month, and be able to make the same amount of money.
Yeah, the sad reality is leadership is a tough thing. Leadership is leadership by example for myself. That's why I see leadership as by example. And if you look at the top leader here in Canada, he's not setting a good example with 93% of his assets in the United States, moving Brookfield to the United States headquarters there to access the capital markets. And our media, our government-funded media, does not hold it to account, does not do any of that stuff. And it doesn't help Canadians. Like, if we only get better if we test ourselves and not try to protect that kind of stuff. Like, the media should be calling that out. You're asking Canadians to put Canada first, and you're not doing it yourself.
Oh, and then some. I'm watching some of the comments here that are coming through, and I'm seeing, like, you're asking the right questions. If we don't have a leader who wants to invest in Canada, then why should anyone else? You're right, Jim. Leadership is by example. And if we have a leader that has 93% of all of their assets in the U.S. and move their headquarters to the U.S., yeah, they're signaling it's better to do business in the U.S. than it is to do business here. Like, he should know that. And he should also, as a savvy economist, understand firsthand, just like Jock Finlayson and Ken Peacock did in the article that they penned and the economic analysis that they penned, know exactly what you need to do to change the tide. You lower taxes, you say you're open for business by decreasing taxes, decreasing regulation, and making it easier to get projects through. That has been exactly opposite, whether it's in BC or whether it's Canada broad. And until that changes, we're not going to see things change. I was invited to go to a roundtable discussion in Alberta that was actually, hosted by a good friend of mine, and they actually brought Stephen Harper and Stephen Poulos to this roundtable discussion with business leaders from around Western Canada. And one of the questions that was asked is, what is it going to take, to change where, the pension plans are investing and where, we're seeing investment dollars go. And Stephen Poulos held no punches. He basically said, you know what? The reality is, until Canadian companies are as productive and as profitable as U.S. companies, you're not going to see the investment dollars come. And I thought to myself, yeah, you're right. You know what? We just can't get there. But what Trump is doing is actually forcing investment into American companies. And what Canada is doing is buying from foreign countries. Like, it is the exact opposite if you want to build infrastructure and build into your industry. So it's a very interesting tale of two countries right now.
Just like any problem, even a personal problem, the first step is recognizing you have a problem. And I don't think our leadership has recognized we have a problem yet, because there's no concrete steps that I see towards solving this problem. But let's leave that here for right now. And this one is close to you because you've actually, as an MLA, you've worked in the healthcare stuff, like you were part of that. And this case of Charlene Pollock, not a good look on the BC NDP. And it took 13 American doctors to pen a letter to BC to say your science is wrong and you need to give that medication to that young lady.
Yeah, two things happened, and I predicted it. On the day that I saw the letter come out, the day before, there was an expose on the fact that BC had been given money by the federal government to actually pay for these rare disease drugs or pharmaceuticals. And so there is a fund that sits there that to pay for exactly this situation. When those two things came to light, there was just no way that EB could continue on the path that he was on. Josie Osborne is a good soldier. I mean, she's smart, but she's also just a really good soldier. She's going to do what EB tells her to do. I don't think this was her. I think she was responding to what the Premier's office was asking of her and telling her to do. This was such a huge misstep by the NDP government. When this came to light and when the public started getting involved, they should have reversed course right then. They should have chosen the opportunity, had a meeting, said new information has come to light. We need to change course. And instead they said, no, we had all the information. Nothing new is done. And this is what they're being told. That committee needs to be rethought. That committee is not experts in every disease. They are not the ones that should be making those types of decisions. Perhaps give a recommendation, but they should not the be all end all. The reality is they are not the be all end all. And as soon as the government decided to change course, suddenly the money was there and the funding was ready. So I think that no one should wear this except for EB and Josie Osborne. And I truly believe that these two individuals, I mean, it is the most gross and ridiculous choice that valued the money over that child's quality of life, and in such a grotesque way. I think the public deserves to be, repugnant, and I think that we deserve better answers on what transpired, and we need to hold those politicians accountable.
Yeah, EB had a chance there to step into into a good role there by saying, you know what, I'm going to override this committee, because that's his authority. He can do that, and he could have just easily said that, hey, no, like nobody that has ever been a parent of a child would deny any child even one more day at whatever cost it is. Like, you're denying this family the amount of stress that they were put under. And to make matters worse, here's Ravi Parmar, which many people are saying is trying to take over EB's job, tried to step in and tried to put the cape on, and Tamara Taggart, I'm sure you remember her from CTV, said, no. She put out a post on Facebook she called them a bunch of names and said that is absolutely not true, and we have the receipts to prove it. And here's the Conservative Party calling out Ravi Parmar as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Tamara Taggart is awesome. She, she doesn't hold any punches. She doesn't have anything to gain or lose. She's fairly, bipartisan in how she punches. And this is a perfect example of a political, smarminess. It was disgusting. There was absolutely zero credit that he could take. He did write letters and put out statements saying, this was the best decision and this was the only way to go. And then he tries to take credit. It's ridiculous. And Ravi Parmar is nothing more than, EB's attack dog. He's been groomed and trained since he was a teenager by Horgan to be an NDPer. He, if you cut him, he probably would bleed orange. So this was a partisan move, and it was just so gross. Once he saw the public was no longer on his side, bad move and rookie move by Parmar, who's just a second-term MLA.
not a good look. Not a good look, right? Just kind of like, for any parent out there or anybody who wants to be a parent, not a good look to try and, one, deny the young lady the medication, and two, to then try to step in front of it and say like that you were the hero in this, when it was actually American doctors that really were the thing. I mean, Americans came to our rescue twice in the past little while. One with the F-15 that brought down that hijacked plane, NORAD. I mean, people, the Canadian media calling it NORAD, but everybody else is an American fighter jet. And again, it shows how our military needs work as well. Like, I mean, I don't know if they were still trying to start the CF-18s or what was going on, but we don't have enough to cover our great big country as well, with the second largest landmass. So having like 40 or 50 operating CF-18s is a lot to cover. So we do rely on the Americans for that. And also stepping in front of this, those 13 American doctors carried a lot of weight. And there's a lot of PhDs on that letter. I'm sure you read the letter there.
Yeah, because, and they are all experts in Batten disease. So they are all experts and should have been the ones to make this decision. And instead it was a committee of, what is it, over 50
40.
individuals?
50, yeah. 40. And then four quit. Like, unbelievable. Like they should publish those names and say, like, you were actually against this. Like, but if there's 50 people in this committee, where was one of the 50 reaching out to some of the hospitals, some of the big hospitals in the U.S. and say, hey, we're not exactly big experts, because we only have one case in BC. Can you help us with this? Like, you obviously have more experience. Where was that?
Yeah. But Jim, this speaks to a bigger issue. This is how the government metes out our healthcare. Government right now decides who lives and who dies by how they spend their money, and by, which hospital is more efficient than another, and which hospital is doing a better job than another. And honestly, it is so. I think if Canadians and if British Columbians understood how our healthcare system is controlled by how much money the government wants to put into it, and how our wait lists and how our care is dictated by that, I think that we would be in more outrage. And I just don't think that we understand well enough that when we go into a hospital, only certain people will get care that night because there is only that amount of money to go around. And that when the hospital budgets, or when the health authority budgets are a little off, they will shut down elective surgeries, or what they deem as elective surgeries, and that people will be waiting for days, fasting every single day, waiting for their turn, to have surgery, and it not coming to fruition. So simply because somebody up way higher than what that surgeon was, because surgeons want to be operating. So it's literally somebody way higher than that's made the decision. We're done for today. So it's not based on healthcare needs. It's not based on what is the true value of a life. It's not based on, what is the business case? How healthy do we keep people? And I think that we as Canadians need to start really rethinking healthcare and how we revision, our healthcare moving forward.
One of the comments on here, he's saying that it sounds like we're justifying money leaving Canada and sticking in the United States. No, we're not. I mean, Renee's company invests tons in this market. I mean, that's what you guys do. And also myself, a lot of my investments are here in Canada. What we're trying to do is get people to be accountable and make it better so more Canadians make that choice, including our Prime Minister, who should lead by example. He is the leader of this country. He should lead by example. And if we don't call it out, media's job is to hold power accountable, not to coddle and echo, right? That's the job of media, and that's a job that's been failed by many of our state-funded media, and that's the truth of the matter. And then we're going to move on to Holly Dome Blacklock story there, Tiff Macklin there. This is Canadian fear job losses and recession likely in 2026. That's an in-house Bank of Canada research report. There you go. So things not looking good. I mean, we need to change it. Daniel Smith said it best. Remove the stuff, the impediments that are in the way. Just remove the impediments. That will give a signal to people with capital, right? Because Canada, Kevin O'Leary pitched it. He said, in the north, let's build an AI data center because we have the cold weather and we have cheap LNG. Two things that the AI centers want. If you look in the States, Meta's building one the size of Manhattan. They're building one, and Elon Musk is building a couple of them, and they're going where the energy is cheap. That's the main requirement. Where's cheap energy? That's the main requirement. Cheap energy that they don't have to fight people for, because they want to, you don't want to have to make AI choose between, heating somebody's home or running the computers, right? So they need access to cheap energy, which Canada has in droves, right? And then the colder weather, because those computers generate a lot of heat, so why not just open the doors and let the cold air in, right? And here, we're in the way of our own success.
I heard recently a business leader say that water and AI are the new oil and gas. And it literally is going to be which country can race to really build that infrastructure. I think the concern is that AI data centers does not create a lot of jobs. Very few jobs for the amount of energy that it consumes. But, and I say but, what those data centers do is support the growth of that industry, and we are so far behind in that industry, and we are not even on the list of companies right now that are moving AI forward. We desperately need to get moving on that, and instead of actually stimulating that particular industry, we're actually getting in the way. And whether it's not providing for the data centers, or whether it's not actually investing in those companies, or seeing those companies leave and go to the U.S. where they have better and more advantageous tax regimes, etc. And I know I brought this example up before, but it's one that I happen to have a working knowledge of, and that is Boise, Idaho. You look at the amount of, whether it's Micron, whether it's Meta, whether it's Google, whether it's Alphabet, and Amazon, they are all in Boise, Idaho. Now think about that. Those companies all have major pieces of infrastructure in Boise, Idaho. An area of Treasure Valley that has just under 1 million people. That is exceptional and a huge economic generator, which is why their population is growing, their jobs are growing, and they're actually seeing this huge surge in their economic growth. The average wage in the Treasure Valley is $134,000. The average wage. That's not family income. That is the average wage. That is some awesome jobs. That is what building a strong economy looks like. Their housing market, average house prices are still $430,000. Bureaucracy, they don't have things like development permits. They don't have things like DCCs. And that is why the development costs are lower, and there's actually lower housing prices. It's not rocket science. It's why our housing prices are continue to be so extreme, because we have one of the most bureaucratic and one of the most costly jurisdictions to build in.
I would suggest to many Canadians that have their elbows up to turn off the CBC and turn off CTV and just go on X and then read some stuff that's out coming from the world. And you're going to see a couple of examples that come to mind. Petroleum is not a dirty word in many other countries, including Norway. Norway has taken petroleum and turned it into a $2 trillion, that's with a T, $1 trillion reserve for their citizens, a sovereign wealth fund worth now $2 trillion that invests in everything. And, and they also, at the same time, are moving towards a cleaner energy, but they'll sell it to anybody, the petroleum, and they have 94% adoption in their EVs. And $2 trillion, that's over 300,000 per capita. And the only province to have any sovereign wealth fund is Alberta. We have missed the opportunity on our petroleum reserves.
And if Alberta had not been participating in all of the, equalization payments, they would have a similar fund to what Norway has for its citizens. Well, but they've been giving the money to the rest of Canada, which has really, made it harder for them to get to that place.
They've been giving it mostly to Quebec. Right?
Oh yeah. And I loved, I don't know how many people saw the clip of Danielle Smith saying, whenever I see the Premier of Quebec, I remind him that he's sitting on the second largest, natural gas reserve, and that should be taken into account when we do the equalization payments, and that there should be, the fact that they also charge way less for their hydro and subsidize their hydro, that should be taken into account, that they could be getting more money from the sale of their hydro, and that they could be getting more money if they actually had a natural gas industry, and then they would be, not eligible for the same amount of payments.
And the second example, if you look to Saudi Arabia, what it's doing right now, again, huge petroleum reserves. They turned it into cash money, which they've done some crazy things. They built some crazy cities and stuff like that. But now they're investing heavily into AI. They've just done a deal with Elon Musk again. And so AI is something they're putting in the future, because we should look at our petroleum as a path to a better future, not just like many Canadians look at it as this thing that destroys the world. You need to look at it as the path to a better tomorrow, right? Because at some point we get to where we're just using solar energy and we're using clean energy at some point, but why not use what we have right now? Look at China as an example. China uses coal, petroleum, whatever it can get its hands on, but they also create a gigawatt of new energy a month, which is almost like putting a nuclear reactor on every day, and that's with solar. There's all these opportunities with petroleum, and all we see is, we listen to Stephen Guilbeault espouse on it, how terrible it is and how it's destroying the planet. And you and I have talked about this endlessly, but it seems like it doesn't sink in for many Canadians.
Absolutely. And, cheap energy is the secret sauce to a very strong economy. We haven't figured that out as Canadians, and we have, really bought this, I guess, shame over our industries, and we need to reclaim just how amazing those industries are. And I think that Norway is a great example. I won't get into the details of China and how, because I think that there are some nuances with having a benevolent dictatorship that I think would detract from the overall status. But I do think that Norway is a great example of how they've invested in innovation and technology to really bolster their own energy efficiencies and their own, climate change status, but at the same time doing so on the back of a really, really significant industry, i.e. petroleum. So I think it's possible, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done there. And we're just not even there. We have the Prime Minister cleared the way with Bill 5. I want to see him use it. He's got the total vote of the entire House, and really we should be seeing some major mega projects being fast tracked. And right now, I just don't see that. The other thing that's really disappointing is that I heard some economists talk about how confident they were that Carney would be able to negotiate a deal for the Canadians. And right now, I don't think that deal is anything other than what Trump wants it to be. I do not think that we've had any leverage or seen any sort of, negotiating power. And I'm very concerned about where Canadians are going to be left in this. My thought is that, they're going to be left with 35% tariff or maybe 25% tariff, but it's not going to be pretty, at least not for the next little while.
Yeah, we don't help ourselves. Like if we had a pipeline to the west or to the east, that helps, because we could say, well, we're going to sell our energy somewhere else. Because again, that is one of our biggest contributors to our GDP. So why wouldn't we want to do that, to explore? I mean, it is the single biggest thing we have. This thing of value. We have some of the best resources in the world by diversity, especially gold. Gold is like $4,600 an ounce today, and it takes 20 years to permit a mine here. And we have zero gold reserves, and we made some decisions that are questionable at best, right? But we're getting close to the hour. We're going to finish up with a couple of things. Pierre Poilievre's running for, to get his seat back there in, I think, Blackfoot, Crowfoot area there. And there's like the ballots now. There's 200 names in the Battle River Crowfoot by-election. This is interference. It's election interference, really, and that's what he's calling it out as. And there's $1,000 to put your name in there, and it's basically the same financial agents for the majority of these people.
Yeah, it's voter suppression, and it's I think it needs to be stopped. There needs to be a law about this, and the fact that they've targeted Pierre Poilievre twice. Now, I think also is needs to be stopped. Going in and seeing that many names on a ballot is incredibly daunting, and trying to, a needle in a haystack to find Pierre's name. Good on the NDP and the Liberals for not actually putting candidates forward. They're, basically saying they look like we're getting Pierre into the House. And this, I think it just reeks that the individuals that are behind this, I just don't understand what their point is and why they need to make it, other than, you and I are sitting here talking about it. So, maybe that's their point. But I really think that we need, political reform, but not in the way that they're saying. I think we need political reform and that we just stop this madness and make it way more difficult for individual candidates to get their name on a ballot.
Well, I mean, CBC showed its colors when Rosemary Barton had the person on explaining why they're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, they gave it airtime, and it seems like odd, right?
The CBC have been in the news twice in the last week and a half or whatever. I'm like, bad days for the CBC. First, it's the Travis Danraj, expose, and now, that one's just the gift that's going to keep on giving, with the leaked tape, where basically they are telling him that you shouldn't run the story because of who your employer is. That is horrific, and needs to be obviously held accountable. And then the whole expose on what they did with their increased revenue and how they didn't give bonuses, which they weren't allowed to do, but they ended up giving increases to all of their employees, which amounted to about the same as what a bonus would be. It's like, okay, that's the most ridiculous workaround you could ever think of.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. No bonus. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Right?
Totally, and it does speak to, okay, so they are propping up the government that is going to give them money. They're saying as much with Mr. Danraj and how they are actually how they're actually conducting themselves. Like, don't go up against your employer because your employer gets money from the government. That's horrific.
Yeah, basically, the Conservative platform was repeal Bill C-18, fund local journalism, and even spend with local journalism. And the Liberal platform was increase funding for the CBC. But, Justin Trudeau and Pascal St-Onge there wanted to double their budget to $3 billion. And Carney gave them the paltry $100 million, which they quickly divvied up amongst the executives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it's like comedy again, right?
And honestly, I've talked to some CBC journalists, and I said, if you're as good as you think you are, then you should be able to do it without government money. Just like exactly. All of the other journalists across Canada have to do. So the fact that you are, you're propped up is not like, and and they say, well, we cover all these smaller areas, and it's good like, one. But you do so from the main centers. And what's happened with Bill C-18 is that all of the smaller centers have lost all of their independent media. They've lost all their smaller radio stations, and
close to 100 failed.
And this is the biggest tragedy, and I can't imagine any government seeing that as a success.
We're still here, and they got their knee on our throat. Do you know what I mean? They've taken away our audience with Facebook. I mean, again, they pick fights with the giants. They pick fights in the AI giants now. Meta, they picked a fight with Elon Musk and Tesla. Like, these are the leaders in the industry for so many things, especially in AI, for Meta and for Tesla. And you pick fights with these people, and you actually make them not only not want to do business with you, you make them actually not like you, right? Like, you accuse them of being a Nazi. And these are things that are just beyond the pale. It's just ridiculous. And I don't understand how Canadians continue to fall for it.
Well, and you know what? It's like, if you're not part of the AI story, if you're not part of where, technology is going, then you will be subject to it. Like, you will become mastered by it. So you better get on the bandwagon, and you better, figure things out, because otherwise you're just going to be the Ponzi at the bottom of the heap here. So I do think that we have a lot of work to do to understand that we're not going to fight giants and win. We need to, play nice in the sandbox, understand our role. And if we want to be a giant, then focus on what is our strength, which is our natural resource sector, and become a giant there, and then fund these other aspects out of it, which would be an amazing economic strategy.
Two very successful Canadians in Toronto just said it best. Chamath, and then I can't remember the guy's name, the CEO of Shopify, said, the secret sauce is energy. It's all about energy, right? But it's all about energy.
Well, and Shopify is now conducting part of its interview, and you have to, as a potential employee, prove that you know how to use AI, that you are using AI in your daily life. And it's like, okay, like, that's the new standard. It's not about whether or not you use it. It's about how well you use it. And right now, what was the statistic? 18% of Canadian businesses are using it, but that's it. Like, it's like the worst statistic that we could ever see.
Yeah, and then the Liberals seem more concerned about wanting to hang on to power, because here's another thing they're trying to float is to, the UK did it. They lowered the voting age to 16. I think that seems to be the bigger focus. How do we hang on to power? Because they're talking about it now, about how lowering the voting age to 16. Because obviously when we're all younger, myself included, when you're younger, you're an idealist. You think everything is just, like there's, everything's free, everything comes from somewhere. But as you age, your life kind of smacks you around. You say, oh, I actually got to go to work, and I got to But so yeah, targeting 16-year-olds. Dan Elvis put out this tweet and says, as a parent, I wouldn't support this, because then obviously these groups would go in there and start targeting kids though too, right, to kind of sway their decision-making skills or their decision-making.
I mean, I was a parent of a blended family of 5 kids, and honestly, I can tell you, I would not have let any one of them vote at 16. Just, teach them how to vote, bring them along with you. But that is, it's absolutely the wrong thing to do.
I think teaching kids financial literacy in school would be the better thing, and teaching them basic economics, and that would be the better thing. And I think we would have a better, structure in Canada. I think that's what we need to focus on that. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of a weird thing, is that we sit on some of the greatest resources that any country would kind of beg for what we have, and we seem to want to squander it for some strange reason.
Yeah, it is strange, and other than ignorance, I don't know why we would be in this position.
We're puzzled. Maybe somebody has the answer. I don't know, but it's been an hour, and a great hour as well. And I think. It's great always having you on. I think this is one of the cooler things that we do on Now Media as well. And I think it gives you a lot of perspective on what's going on in the world. And media's job is to hold power accountable. And you have such great experience in the political arena. And we need more people calling out authority. And again, BC to me is here's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario. And you sat as an MLA for BC. All the deals that you guys made as BC United or BC Liberals, all those big projects have come to an end, and there's no big projects. We just gave away a project that could be a big project, right? We just gave away the BC ferry deal, because I guess we don't do big projects here in British Columbia. But
yeah, that's a great example, though, of a project that the NDP could have taken on as one of their own, just the same as we did Site C Dam or, the LNG or the pipeline. All of those projects could have been done by an NDP government that still had projects on the docket, but they just simply don't. And, thank you for this hour. I hope that, if anything, I'm just trying to make politics make sense. And, the nature of our politics is that, we need to show where there's work to be done. And so, I hope that, if anything, we see that there's lots of improvement to make, and hopefully an understanding of how it affects our lives and why our lives are the way they are.
And I know a lot of people accuse us of being very, very right-leaning, but also we hold power to account, and who happens to be in power? The NDP and the Liberals, right?
Yeah.
And you've called out John Rustad many times, and so it's holding power to account, and the ones making the decisions right now are the NDP and the Liberals. So those are the ones that need to be held to account.
If anyone wanted to know my political stance, I'm what I would consider centrist, or slightly right of center. My heart's on my left and my pocketbook's on my right. But you can't have social services and social systems without actually having an economy. So I'm a pretty big pragmatist when it comes to understanding our economy and making sure that our economy is firing on all cylinders, so that we can actually have all of the great supports and social services that we love to have as Canadians.
Yeah, and we're both big on family, and obviously to have a good community, you need good families, and you need the family to support the whole community as well, and that's part of what being a Canadian is. And I hope that if you're an NDP or Liberal watching this, you take the information that's provided in, and not take it as an affront to you, but take it as, how can we do better, and how can we lead by example? I think that's the better thing. We'll definitely give you credit when credit's due.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, thank you, and thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now,